important for us to get a frame of reference, as was in the invite for the appointment. There's a number of things which we can set up, measure before, during, and after the implementation. So what I wanted to do was have a conversation about some of those items, identify some tips and tricks that we've identified, and see if how those are can most be applied for your environments. Within our first slide here, I just wanted to put together a quick expectation set, introduction for who I am, what I do, what Tribridge does, and then talk about why there is the choice to change what your ERP is going to be. So talk about the objectives of the system, either real or perceived, and then the state of business process, core competencies within the organization, and then the measurements of how you're measuring what your desired results are versus your actual. And then some synthesizing points around how we've seen and experienced success with some of our customers in using these traits, tips, or tricks. So a quick introduction to Tribridge at a glance. From a slide perspective, you can see on here that Tribridge, established in 1998, we have about 600 team members. There's about 3 separate areas within the company of what we do. There's the technology piece around implementation, which is the entire stack of Dynamics, GP, SL, NAV, AX, and CRM. There's also platform practices, business intelligence and analytics, as well as human capital management. Additionally, we have a Concerto Cloud service offering which supports a single-tenant private cloud environment as well as hybrid cloud solutions. And then an overlay to all of these is enterprise consulting, where it is not product or practice specific, but rather traditional business consulting around different areas of focus, operational, technological, customer experience, and transformational. And as I had said, around Concerto, you can see in the next slide that we have won ISV of the Year from Microsoft, and we have the technical skills where these are what the technologists do. We'll talk a little later about core competencies of our customers or of your companies, and say, are the people who are most fit to do something doing it, and are they within your 4 walls or outside? So technical experience paving the way as far as how we are offering cloud solutions, as well as making sure that we are exceeding the standards from ITIL, as well as the 9949's uptime of the solution. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. As Adam had introduced me, again, my name is Sean Kenny. I'm a client partner with Tribridge, which means regardless of what the product or service that we are supporting from an engagement perspective, I have ultimate responsibility for delivery. I've said I've made my career out of being the one throat to choke. So if there are things going on that are everything's happy and successful, it's certainly a testament to the team that we have in place. But if there are issues, problems, things that need addressing, that's my fault. I work to get those resolved so that there's no misunderstanding of who has to navigate what organizational practice or team. It's just I can work with the team both internally and externally. So that was our quick overview of who I am and who we are as Tribridge. Starting from the beginning or before the beginning of the project, we look at what's going on technologically, and a lot of what we're looking at is what's the point of view that we're taking on what's happening with our current system. I put this slide together to really identify that there are ERPs that are referenced. Here's what we're using in our environment is what we oftentimes hear. And it's, okay, why do I have to change from what I have into something else? So I just wanted to ground us in the fact that the ERPs that we've all invested in from a Dynamics perspective have all of the feature functionality that many disparate systems have had over the years, and based on the investment by Microsoft to continue to build out the platform so that it is an even more robust ERP. And oftentimes we get into the discussion of, is it a platform? Is it a product where I just put the software in, next, finish, and everything should work as expected? Well, there's where we oftentimes run into our issues or problems, is around those expectations. So I also wanted to talk about business transformation. The idea of going through an ERP implementation or an ERP selection and implementation isn't just, let me put the software in and everything works. So it is a transformational activity. And with it being a transformational activity, there's changes that occur not only from a technological perspective, but also from a people, whether it's personnel or process, what those people are doing. How are you allocating the human resource portion of the business, and is there the technological and process training behind them to support them so that the umbrella, which is the ERP implementation, has a greater chance of success. And as far as what that success is, one of the questions that we are always asking is, what's the definition of success? We hear, or you hear, we all hear, whether it's in boardrooms, conference rooms, break rooms, water cooler, that when there's an evaluation going on, that when we're implemented, there's going to be rainbows and unicorns. Customer service will have the same view as operations. Sales will get a clear view into what our production schedule is. And our supply chain will be more efficient. Accounting will have everything that they need at their fingertips. They can hit the easy button. Everything will come up. But around those objectives, the same way that Aristotle had said, the best way to build a point or make a case is tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you told them. Where I had heard that in a Toastmasters event, but where it's applicable for us is transition over to the point of view of who are the people that are going to be experiencing that change. What will the end state look like? Make sure that there's clarity around there. Deliver on what that end state will look like. And then tell them what you told them. Measure what you delivered. Is it the same as what your initial end state was going to be? Starting with the end state in mind, it really comes to the focus, the direction, or the project, before the project, to say we're going to go straight to implementation is less than accurate, because there was a study done by the Ken Blanchard company that said over 70% of change initiatives fail. As this is business transformation, it would be considered a organizational change initiative, and when those change initiatives are undertaken, almost 30% of them are launched without any formal structure whatsoever. Back to our 3 steps of putting things in place beforehand. Tell them what you're going to tell them. There is a change that is going to occur. We anticipate that it's going to take this long, go through these steps. Do we reference methodology like SureStep? Here's what we're going to do from a analysis perspective, from a design perspective: build, test, deploy, post go live. Are those the terms we use? It really does depend on the engagement of our end users or our business people. So, why do these initiatives fail? As we talked about, it's because they lack the formal structure, but traditionally, we are all skeptical of change, just because, we think change is great for everybody else, but our natural default position is to make sure that we just stick our heads in the sand and hope it'll go away. The reality of that happening really isn't real. So back to understanding the business case, understanding it, sharing it with the team so that there is that buy-in. Once there's the buy-in, the thing that has to be recognized is impact. What is the impact to that person, that department, that division of this change, so that there is clarity too. We're not just changing for the sake of change. Once we have the change process in motion, we need to make sure that we're evaluating what the impact is. Before we began, I talked about setting up checkpoints or measuring before you start, while in process, and after go live. A little later in the presentation, we will talk about measurements, scorecards, analytics, but from a process perspective, making sure that we are measuring it. Are we realizing the change which we had anticipated? Back 30 years ago, the question was asked during an election cycle, are we better today than we were 4 years ago? Well, take that down to a micro level, to the company and the organization, and are you better since the initiative has started than you were before it had started? And that kind of communication will make sure that we are collaborating, and there is the desired output of recognizing the goals and the results of what we set out to do. And then the last piece of that is whether it's post-go-live support type approach or refinement. That's business, that's a business process, that's technology, that's people. Back to the training pieces of what we have talked about. And really, as most of us have gone through, there's no mystery about change. The focus needs to be on the front end of that, getting it right in the planning pieces so that it truly is execution from there. And I will move now on to our return on investment. As we had seen in the previous slide, things are going to be better. This is very soft language. And when we're focusing on our ROI, we need to make sure that we're measuring it in hard terms and not soft language. Some of the examples that I've put in here are specific examples of what we are measuring and how we can identify, is it trending the right way or the wrong way? Regardless of which way it's trending, identifying that we have increased our service levels to customers based on this change by this amount, it tells us that the results that we're seeing are consistent with what our vision and our plans were. And as we move down the list, we can just see organizationally, financially, operationally, from an infrastructure perspective, our infrastructure of service cost transitioned from a CapEx hit to an OpEx, and therefore we're saving this amount over this duration. I picked 3 years as a standard duration for what you're capturing, what your infrastructure as a service cost would be on there. And therefore, you're looking at your total ROI as the total investment of this project, this program, this initiative, to recognize what are savings or operational improvements, therefore top-line revenue benefits are through the results of the project. And just stepping back again to calculate what that return on investment is. Regardless of which ERP you've chosen, you're using today, or you plan on implementing, there's feature functionality which is available within each one of those products. And as we choose a product, there is the evaluation or steps that need to occur to say, how does this fit my current business? Well, here's where the people, process, technology question comes into place. Because there's the way you do things today, and is that based on deliberate process establishment? That's the way we've always done it, or that was something that somebody did at a previous company and said, here's the way we're going to do it. So that evaluation is, how do I either adopt the process that is inherent within the application, or modify my processes to support the hybrid between here's the way it is in the system and here's the way I do it differently. If that is a differentiator for you and your business, that is something that certainly makes sense, but you need to make sure that that is how you're evaluating or how you're utilizing the application. Because if it's not standard and it's not going to achieve a process change, that means that there's going to be some sort of modification or enhancement to the product. A key area that I've used as a delivery tool and we've used within the firm is that of a rice chart. And the first time that I'd used this, while at Tribridge, the joke was, ha, 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 what does rice have to do with my project? But the reality of identifying the standard pieces, or if you add an S on the end, a rices chart, you look at, here's what the standard functionality is, and then what's different, what else has to be done as you are evaluating, planning what it's going to take for this transformation. You need to identify what are the reports that are required. Each of the products has a plethora of standard reports in the system. The data is there for most, I'm using air quotes, standard items. However, your differentiating processes may need to extend the data source. And if that's the case, you're going to need to modify or create additional reports beyond the standard that's in there. So identifying a column or a listing of what those tasks or reports are, and then I for integrations. While an ERP can be everything to the entire company, oftentimes there are different pieces or parts, again, core competencies that are looked at outside of the application and will be integrated in as a data point. Payroll, benefits, recruiting, learning management, all of these pieces and parts, time cards or time clock entries, things like that are different integrations which you want to make sure you're capturing in what is this transformation going to look like? How much time and effort am I going to have to dedicate from our team's perspective in order to achieve this? C standing for conversions. So how much data are we going to bring from our existing system into the new system? If we're doing, if we're bringing the data over from a financial perspective, is it summary? Is it detailed? For what duration? If it's your master data, has there been any cleansing that has gone on within the company to make sure that the data you're bringing over is, one, accurate, and two, actionable, meaning that they're not customers or part numbers which haven't been used in insert time here, 1, 3, 5, 7 months, years, whatever your level of comfort is from that. And then the E of the RICE chart is for enhancements. If you are not going to institute a process change to adopt standard functionality, then you're going to need to modify or enhance the application. And again, it's very simple from a delivery or project management perspective. This isn't work breakdown structure level items. These are scorecard level, okay, where are we with a directionally accurate amount of completion? So it's in one of 5 stages. And if we break it back down to here's what we're doing from a define, design, build, test, deploy perspective, you just set it at 20% for each when you're in requirements, define, build, test, deploy. As we all know, the reason that we are going to test these things is because how they function, what the result of the testing is, may be consistent with the requirement, but different than a desired result. So making sure we're looking at the whole picture around, one, what's the effort that's required from a team member perspective. And the reason I say team member is because it's not from my perspective or our perspective, it's not an our project or a company project. It's our team is responsible for making sure that the project is successful. So, insert analogy here. We're in it with the people who are going to maintain the system after go live. So it's not just a Tribridge or a Sean project. It's our entire project team, so that when we're looking at what the return on investment is, we have to think back to before that. What's the level of effort, real dollars, from a spend perspective on partners, ISVs, and what our internal cost is from how much time is being dedicated to from our team members or from our employees to the project. Back to a quote of Peter Drucker, right? You can't manage what you don't measure. So back to the project before the project, what do we consider success, and how are we going to put identifiable measurements in there so that as time goes on, we're looking at real hard data and not subjective, well, it feels like things are easier or it's not as confusing for people, in order for us to make sure that we are reporting those results to the company, to our management, to our shareholders. We need to make sure that those are real and quantifiable. We spoke a little bit about business process previously, and being the father of small children, I felt this was really appropriate, that as we look at established or current business process, sometimes the best evaluators or process consultants can be 3-year-olds, because the question for everything is why. Why did you do that? Well, why? Well, why? And I know that I've sometimes gotten to the point of, after the 15th why, you just get to because. But from a business perspective, I also wanted to reference in here a book by John Miller, which is QBQ, the question behind the question. As we continue to ask why, it gets us to the root cause of what we're trying to understand, identify, or change. And in such, we need to make sure that the question behind the question is getting us beyond our discomfort with change and really getting to what is the reason as to why I'm doing what I'm doing, or why the customer service team is handling this a certain way. So as we think of processes and making sure that we're getting to the reason why we're doing it, and it's not going straight to because that's the way Mary told me, Jim taught me to do this when I started 5 years ago, and it's just because. We're looking at it in a thoughtful, deliberate manner so that as we evaluate what our order-to-cash process is, our procure-to-pay process is, our acquire-to-retire from a fixed assets perspective process is, and our hire-to-terminate. I came up in a time when it was hire-to-fire, but as time has gone on, we've modified that language and gone from hire-to-terminate as far as the life cycle of a recruit through employment. But one of the areas that we've gotten more and more interest and recognition in when we're looking at how we're designing processes and systems for implementation is, what's our customer acquisition process? Because what are the associated steps, costs, and process of acquiring those? To say, again, back, being deliberate, are we doing marketing? Yes, we're doing marketing. Okay. How are we measuring back to what campaign brought in what prospect, what customer, and how do we bring them through the cycle of taking them from a lead and a prospect into a customer? Depending upon your area of business, that may not be relevant, but in keeping with that mindset, if we also say there's the customer acquisition, if there is a product manufacturing or distribution perspective, what's our ship complete percentage, and how are we measuring that? Are we saying we're shipping complete if we cancel items off of the order in order to get it out the door, or are we putting things on back order? Therefore, what is our customer success rate? What is their interaction or feeling of, I'm going to order this, and X times out of 10, I'm going to have the order canceled or part of the order canceled, and therefore, what is that doing for our long-term support of that customer. Happens once, it happens. Happens 2 or 3 times, well, maybe they start looking for an alternate supply chain. You know, these are all areas where, as we're looking at what our business process is and how we are digging into each step of those areas, we make sure that we are asking the question of why and getting to what the best option is, rather than just, again, back to here's the way we've done it, or it's easiest to do it that way because that's the way I know, or that's the way the old system is. Back to recognizing and realizing your return on investment. When you're doing this transformational project, what you don't want to happen is have the same processes in place for everything with just a new UI. Just something to make sure you are keeping in mind and working through as you're going through our the design phase of the project. And in your focus of what those processes are, bringing in new technology, going through this sort of transformation really gets the opportunity to focus on core competencies. I won't spend a lot of time here, just wanted to identify what's the purpose of each of these roles. Again, now is the time, as you're planning this or evaluating how you make some changes to maximize your ROI, you say, what is the role of our sales organization? How much time do I want people selling, as opposed to making sure data is correct in the system, which goes back to reporting and measurement, but you know, there's that balance that has to be struck. Same holds true with customer service. Are these data entry people that need to track down things which either are happening on the floor somewhere in the company and not in the system, or are they utilizing the tool set that they have in order to provide good, great, fantastic customer service to your prospects and existing customers? Broken down by each one. Operations, what kind of visibility do we want production to have so that customer service and sales have the same picture? Is there a glass pipeline that can be put in place so that there is one version of the truth, as opposed to the utilization of those other Microsoft tools like Excel, when things are just done? Well, I took data out and moved it around, and here's what the result is. Walk into a sales and operation planning meeting, and you have 4 different versions of the truth based on what the Excel document says. One area that I did want to touch on briefly was, within your core competencies, what kind of IT infrastructure are you building, maintaining? Infrastructure means a couple of different things. From a corporate perspective, is the team in place to support what's happening technologically? From a hardware perspective, is the infrastructure in place so that you have people that are focused on maintaining version, patches, updates, things of those nature? Or is the focus more to take care of those items above finance, accounting, sales, customer service, and operations, and outsource pieces or parts of that? Larger question to be sure, but you know, there is so much availability of cloud technologies out there now that it is a true differentiator for how the environment's being supported, both for ERP, CRM environments, as well as the Office suite. So, is the infrastructure being supported on-prem or in the cloud, and is it being done partially by staff, augmented with consultants, or outsourced completely. Again, all definitional items which need to be established as you're either planning or executing the implementation. And then from the systems perspective, will you have app dev to extend either internally developed applications or the ERP, and who's bridging the business systems gap between business users and technologists, so that when there is a change needed, how it's getting documented, recognized, delivered, and then supported for after the fact. In addition to the RICE chart, which we spoke about earlier, one scorecard that I found a tremendous amount of success with is making sure that there's one area where we're looking at what our total cost of ownership is. Total cost of ownership being planned, maybe not recognized yet. Some of these will certainly be estimates, but if you're evaluating before either an acquisition and the associated integration with it, or the carve out of an existing piece of business, department, division, then making sure that you're looking at it this way: what's my software and related cost? What's my hardware and related cost? The other column that we have at the end there is what's the cloud impact of that? So are we saying, yes, I want to keep all this on-prem, I want to keep it as CapEx and control it within my environment, or do I want to look at least evaluate from a cost perspective what it would be like to move that to the cloud? So I said again, software, hardware, and then planning, configuration, implementation. What are the costs associated to consultants? That can be, again, purely implementation consultants or different pieces and parts along the way. Is somebody coming in and doing the system selection? From a system selection, is that feeding into what the design or define phases are going to be? This can be as high level or granular as desired, but if we're looking at scorecards, the best is for there to be a single point of reference for, here's what the summary is. The detail will certainly reside in a or multiple sheets behind that. In moving down the path of identifying process and selecting systems, one area which we oftentimes consider an afterthought is, what is our customer profitability? Is every customer a good customer? And I'll ask, what if starting tomorrow, Starbucks only sold tea? What if on June 1st, Southwest required business attire and they charge for all of their bags? And insert something else in there as well. So evaluating what is the impact of the change that we are planning or in process of, and how does that impact our customers? Every change has an impact on customers directly, indirectly, planned or unplanned. So in taking a little different point of view there and saying, from our customer's perspective, what is their level of engagement? Are we easy to do business with? How do they contact us, interact with us? So that's where we talk about some of what the customer experience assessments are, what kind of journey mappings are being put in place. And that's web, that's ISV, that's marketing campaigns, and direct customer interactions. And then from that, being able to build out what those customer insights or analytics are, so that you get a better, fuller view of what our customers' experience is and how we can improve that and make sure that those customers that we are serving are receiving the most value and benefit from their interaction as we are as a company as well. From a performance improvement perspective, I also like to think back to the Yogi Berra comment of, oh, yeah, nobody really goes there anymore, it's too crowded. Well, we get so focused on here's what we have to achieve from an ERP perspective, what other projects, initiatives were underway, or did we say were going to happen before, during, or as a result of the ERP, so that you can make sure that after implementing the system, you have the data required to understand, are we losing sales to stockouts and log lead times? What is our supply chain situation? Are we buying from a vendor as the primary provider of a product, a competitor? So are they eating first before selling to us? Is that causing us to ship incomplete, have longer order fulfillment times? And then, as we talked a little bit earlier, from an acquisition or integration perspective, do you have multiple teams within the organization doing the same thing? And if they are doing the same thing, is it intentional? If it is intentional, do we need for that to continue? Back to trying to use the data, use the system to change our behavior and achieve better results. Which leads me now into what are our measurements? How are we measuring things? Back to Peter Drucker, you can't manage what you don't measure. So as we're looking at what visualizations we're putting in place, how are we making sure that people aren't going through their TPS reports, which are 300 pages, but rather what's the summary level visual, which gives me a belief and then the ability to go into the data to make sure it's consistent with what that visual is. So again, exception-based or summary-based, and then drilling into the detail so that you're using descriptive or diagnostic analytics so that you can identify what's happened historically or how trends are going, and then with those trends using predictive or prescriptive analytics to make sure that you're tying back into whether it's marketing or customer experience or production where products need to be. And then again, the view of streamlining budgeting, forecasting, FP&A around financial modeling is just something which there's so much time which can be spent digging into data, modeling within Excel, setting your standard, executing that standard, and having consistency across the corporation is something which couldn't be more important. We have pieces and parts along the way where we're aligning data, operations, customers, vendors, but until we have it all brought together in a format which can be digested, it's just a lot of different data points. And then we're almost at time here, but I wanted to just briefly talk about a couple of different areas where not everything needs to be done day one. Recognizing what are we trying to accomplish and what are our goals and deadlines. We talk here about a customer who was not operating it was a public company not operating with a auditable financial system. So the audit committee had said, here's what has to happen within this amount of time. So focusing on not the overall elephant, but rather the couple bites of how do we get financial operations in place so that there is a system, it is auditable, we can, with a high level of confidence, publish what our results are, and then that sets the stage for what we're trying to accomplish with phase two, procurement, production, advanced warehousing, all of those shop floor control items, so that it's let's do it a couple bites at a time. Let's make sure our people are focused on what needs to happen financially, and then let the people who do this for a living worry about the technology, the infrastructure, where it resides. But let's do it rapidly. Let's continue to operate with speed and purpose. And then talking again about identifying what you're trying to accomplish, putting a plan in place so that you are identifying what you're going to do, tell them what you're going to do or execute it, and then tell them what you told them. Measure it, make sure that there is that consistency coming full circle from vision to fruition. And then integrating the stack. I also wanted to identify here, from a technology perspective, there's tremendous amount of options out there. How do we leverage the technology and utilize the investments that have been made already, so that a company gets feature functionality that they need and don't have to worry about the cost, the skill set, the infrastructure that's associated with it. So a professional organization had been doing a number of items in disparate systems. Again, the Microsoft reporting tool, which is Excel, was certainly utilized there, but identifying ERP, here's what we want to be doing with Dynamics GP, CRM, here's how we're going to be tracking leads, memberships, and the like, and then integrating that in the cloud, in the Concerto Cloud service with Office 365, Link, and SharePoint Online. So I ran 2 minutes over, so I apologize for that, but if there are any questions, Adam, I'm happy to address those.
Great, thanks, Sean. Yeah, so if you've got any questions, there's the Q&A tab on the lower right-hand side of the screen, so please feel free, don't be shy. Ask as many questions as you'd like. Sean will get to them all. So Sean, we'll give people just a couple of minutes here to formulate their thoughts.
Well, I got one directly, which was, why is business intelligence or reporting always such an afterthought? As I talked about earlier, when I try and break down what the effort's going to be for an engagement, it's looking at what the total effort's going to be. Not here's what our firm's going to do, here's what you're going to do, but this is what has to get done, and we'll resource it later, whether that's internal, external, or some sort of partnership. And if you are identifying on the front end, here's the reports that I need, that really puts everybody in a better state as the project's going along, rather than, oh yeah, we have to do month-end reports, but we can worry about them after we go live.
We'll just give people just a couple of more minutes to get some questions here. Okay, Sean, someone's asking, bridging the gaps in the organization, how do you manage constant change in process?
Well, thank you, Dawn. That's a challenge that we run into in every engagement, and the idea of you can't be smarter tomorrow than you were yesterday is not accurate. It's not the right approach to say, but that's the way we're going to do it. So bridging that gap, much the same as a change control process technologically, making sure that there's understanding or impact as to what that process change means. Again, it's a little longer of a time frame where that gets impacted, and there has to be more collaboration. Depending upon your organization, that may or may not work because of the speed that the organization's operating under. But we all have time to do it a second time when we don't spend the time to do it right the first time. So I'd say making sure that there's that awareness of why you're changing, that you're being deliberate in why a process is being changed. And it's for the better of the organization, not just, well, I don't want to change because we've always done it this way.
Okay, we've got another question. In life after implementation, I was looking for how do you manage the application lifecycle with multiple ISVs?
Sure, that is, depending upon the environment in which you're in, that can certainly be a challenge due to versioning and other upgrade path items. As we look at the systems or information technology piece of the organization, part of what you have to make sure is in place is who is maintaining the relationship or the understanding of what's going on as far as, I know this may be an overused term, but what the roadmap is for that product. We've seen ISVs that their feature functionality gets rolled into the product. So, what happens there? Do you have to modify your process to incorporate what's being done in the system now, or do you have to continue to use that ISV? Unfortunately, it's not a one-size-fits-all, but much the same as your process evaluation or your change control process. You have to have a regular rhythm in where you're evaluating what the life cycle is of that current version. Are there things being sunset, or is there functionality being brought into the product which makes that ISV obsolete? So I hope, Terry, that was more definitive answer than what you what was addressed in the webinar.
We'll see if anybody else has any more questions. Remember, the Q&A tab is on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. So just type your questions in there, and Sean will be happy to answer them. And if you think of any questions after the event, Sean, did you give them your email?
I did not. I'm happy to answer any questions that people may have. It is Sean, SEAN .Kenny, KENNY, at Tribridge, TRIBRIDGE.com. So if there are questions, comments, or other input, happy to receive whatever feedback or questions you may have.
All right. Well, looks like we don't really have any more questions coming in. So why don't we end there? But I just want to thank everybody for attending. Once again, as I mentioned earlier, the session was recorded or is being recorded. It'll be available online within probably the next day or so. So once again, thanks so much for attending. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email Sean directly. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.